Welcome back, football fans, to another episode of Necessary Roughness here on the Bite Size Sports Network. I'm joined, as usually, by Nick, and today we've got Michael Phillips joining us, and he will be regular with us going forward for the foreseeable future. So we've got a third host with us, and before we jump into, uh, we're talking AFC North and NFC North today, so it's a good time for Michael to join us. But before we jump into all that, I'm going to give you a chance, Michael, to introduce yourself to the audience, let them know where they can find you, and things like that.
Well, as John said, I'm Michael. I don't really need to reiterate that, but I major Packers fan. Excited to be with Bite Size Sports now. You can find me on Twitter at this is flipped at that handle right there, and that's really about it. That's all I got on the docket right now. So I'm just heavily on Twitter.
Yeah, no, he's a good follow. I
Yeah.
vouch.
Thank you.
Welcome in, Mike.
All right. Well, yeah. So, like I mentioned, we're gonna do the AFC and NFC North. We're gonna start with NFC today, and it's gonna be same layout as last week. We're going to talk favorite free agent signings for the division, talk some team specifics, a little bit geared more towards the draft, and then we'll do our much too early division winner predictions, which will be mostly vibes at this point.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, you can't really pick anything real right now.
exactly, but it'll be fun anyway, and maybe we'll stir the pot in the chat a little bit, and jump into the comments at any time if you agree, disagree, if there's anything tangential you want us to talk about, we will surely do so. So, the Black and Blue Division, the NFC North, and I'm happy to have a Packers fan on with me just for just for some discourse. As you all know, I'm a Vikings guy, but let's start with Nick here with your favorite free agent signing for the division as a whole. We'll start with an AFC East guy and leave it unbiased.
Okay, well, you just said I'm an AFC East guy, and I'm really not going to be biased here as much as I can, but I'm going Tremaine Edmonds.
Oh
I
man,
think that when we were talking about this, when we were talking about who might go where, we were talking about Chicago, and I said I hope that doesn't happen. Obviously, as a Bills fan, but I just didn't see it happening because why would you go from a situation where it's you're a playoff team and contender for the Super Bowl each year and it's cold already? Why would you go to a team where it's cold, even colder, and you're not anything near that? So while I was surprised by that move, I think that it was a slam dunk for the Chicago Bears because to kind of solidify the middle of the defense there with Tremaine Edmonds, who's just been an absolute solid player for us for the last 5 seasons. It really came into his own as a surefire tackler over the last two. He's just somebody who can get in. He runs silent to sideline. We knew that coming out of Virginia Tech. He's only I think he was only 19 years old when we drafted him in 2018. Mm-hmm. Tremaine Edmonds is just a complete high flying slam dunk type guy. He can play. I wouldn't be surprised if he was an incredible basketball player as well at 6'5", 6'6". And I think the Bears just got their middle linebacker for the future with him. So just because there haven't been too many other crazy free agent signings in the division, I'd have to go with Tremaine there, going to Chicago.
Yeah, he's a guy who's really going to open up the playbook for Eberflus on that end. Roquan is a good backer, but nowhere near the type of frame that Edmonds brings, taking away some things over the deep middle. And I mean, he was making do with Jack Sanborn at Mike for most of last year. So I think that's really going to open some things up for him.
Yeah.
And we'll talk some more about about the other moves the Bears made to follow that up. But real quick, while I got you on the topic, Nick, do you think the Bills would have gotten even close to 4 years, 72?
No, I think the reason that he went to Chicago was because Brandon Beane, the GM of the Bills, wasn't giving him that. I think he wanted to give him somewhere closer to 2 or 3 seasons, just because he, while he's been really great, we have other options that we can fill the void with guys like Von Miller, Matt Milano, and we have options that we can get a middle linebacker that can kind of fill the void of what Tremaine, had. And I think that Chicago really wanted him. I think it was 4 years. What was it, 72? It's a lot of money. It's a big contract. While he has been a 2-time Pro Bowler, both of those Pro Bowlers selections have been because he replaced somebody. He hasn't really, proven himself to be an actual Pro Bowler. But he is a really solid player. And as I said, he's so to answer your question, no, I don't think we were giving him that. I think that we were looking for more like 2 or 3 seasons. And the Bears really wanted him. They got it. They got their guy.
Yeah. Money talks. Michael, who is your favorite free agent signing of our division?
Well, so my answer was Tremaine Edmonds.
Okay.
No, okay. I love Tremaine Edmonds. I was really upset when Chicago signed him. But to not take Nick's answer, I will go with my second answer, which is Byron Murphy. Which I don't want to pick. I don't want to pick a Packers player that's just too biased. Also, we barely even have any. So I'll go with Minnesota corner now. Byron Murphy. Was a big fan of him when he was with Arizona. Clearly, Minnesota has some secondary issues. So I think having Byron Murphy, who I think predominantly would play better in the slot, but can play outside. He's just kind of an every defensive back, really, for Minnesota. And as much as that pains me to say, I'm very excited for him and hope that he's great for 15 games out of this season. It's against Green Bay. Bench him. I don't want him on the field, but yeah, he's my favorite free agency signing for this division, probably, except for Tremaine Edmonds.
Yeah, he was a sneaky one. The numbers were reported 2 years, $22 million. His 2023 cap hit's actually 2.81. The way they bumped that out. So, and I'll tell you some more about the way Rob Brzezinski structured some of these contracts to maximize the 2023 cap. But that was, cornerback was the number one need for us. And if I wasn't so tethered to the guys I'm about to mention, that would probably be mine as well. I'm going to cheat a little bit though, and I'm going to say the Detroit secondary. I was pining for Cam Sutton all off season, especially with Flores coming over from Pittsburgh. I thought that was money in the bank. But he gets 3 years, 33. So same APY, I guess, as Byron Murphy. But a little bit longer contract there, and he is a little bit older as well. But he's a similar guy to Murphy. Started in the slot for several seasons before 2 years starting on the boundary in Pittsburgh. So he's got that inside out flexibility. And then they also signed Emmanuel Mosley from San Francisco, coming off either an Achilles or an ACL that knocked him out last season. But he was great in the slot prior to that. And another guy who's great in the slot is CJ GJ, coming over from Philly on 1 year, $8 million.
I completely spaced that signing. That would have been my pick.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Awesome.
And I wanted to isolate that one too. But honestly, I looked at it and I was like, these are three. And granted, he's nominally a safety, but he plays plenty of slot corner, and that's just a smattering of signings that just solves an entire problem on the back end. So I had to kind of group those together a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I'm going to go with, and I was pretty bummed to see it. And my kind of second guy was Mosley, because slot corner is probably the biggest need for my Vikings. But yeah, they stole them all from us. So pretty good offseason for them, and especially in the secondary there. So let's talk.
What I just realized, by the way, is that what we just talked about. The NFC North had some damn good free agency signings. Like, geez, it was like really underrated. I think, especially because me and Mike didn't even realize, we had forgot about C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I mean, that is such a good signing, and such under the radar, because he was really a good player for Philly last year. I thought he would re-sign for sure.
Yeah, and signed like later into free agency too
Yeah.
than you thought he might have.
Yeah, and
Weird deal.
it's dangerous. It's dangerous for a player that he's like, just kind of getting into his own, coming into his own as a player, and then just leaving the situation that he was in. So we're gonna see what happens with him in Detroit because Dan Campbell hopefully will have him ready.
Yeah, I mean, CJ Gardner-Johnson, I was really shocked because the price tag that was attached to his contract for Detroit is so low for what I was expecting. Yeah. I know he was looking for like 10, 11, something like that from Philadelphia and like a couple other teams that were interested. I know that there was a little bit of a rumor, not necessarily, but just kind of somebody made an edit of him in a Bengals uniform, and he was like, "Oh, this kind of looks sick. Like I could go there." With the departure of Jesse Bates, who I'm sure we'll talk about later on,
and Von Bell,
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really shocked that Cincinnati maybe didn't push more or offer him more. Maybe they did, and he just kind of took a lower contract, kind of a prove it. And who wouldn't want to be coached by Dan Campbell? Honestly,
he seems
exactly. He seems like an incredible person. So I understand the signing now, but
it should be it should really be a good secondary there in Detroit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and CJ, he called out. I don't know if you saw him call out Jonathan Gannon on social. It was just that he didn't put him in a position to win, basically, with his game plan in the Super Bowl. It was even maybe in a response to some headline about his introductory presser with Arizona regarding the Super Bowl loss, and he like quote tweeted it and was like, "Yeah, you didn't put us in a position to win, man." Wow. So he might have been kind of disenfranchised with the Eagles in general, even with Gannon's departure. And of course they prioritized the vets, brought Brandon Graham back, brought Fletcher Cox back, Kelsey. So it'll still be a solid team, but that's a big loss for them. Another big loss for them might be TJ Edwards going to the Bears. So they doubled down on linebackers as well. And for the Bears, we've got some pretty significant draft capital as well. And we also brought over DJ Moore in a trade with in the number 1 pick trade with the Panthers. So now when you consider a guy like Nate Davis coming over from Tennessee at 3 years, 30 to play right guard, presumably right. You consider DJ Moore coming over along with Chase Claypool from last season, forming a trio with Darnell Mooney. You consider Bob Tunyon coming over.
Yeah.
To go along
with. Sorry
Cole.
about that, Mike.
You know what? He's from Illinois. He grew up like 20 minutes from Chicago. So like I don't. And honestly, I'm not even mad that he's gone. So
it kind of reminded me as I said this when he signed. It reminded me of like Dansby Swanson going to Chicago because he's literally he grew up in their backyard. So it's kind of like the same type of thing
there. Yeah. Lost David Montgomery, but they did bring over Deontay Foreman from Carolina, who was really solid for them last season. All this to say. And I'll table this to whoever wants to speak first here. Do you think this is enough around Justin Fields to really give us a fair evaluation of him as a passer when you consider that wide receiver trio, the tight end duo, which should be a solid run game as well with Khalil Herbert back, and an offensive line that should be pretty shored up. With another year of development for Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, and Nate Davis at guards. Just the ensemble is improved for sure, but do you think it's enough to really find out what you've got with Justin Fields?
I to tie in like what I think they should kind of do with the 9th pick, really, and it might be a little high, but I'm still a little worried about their O-line, even though there is a year of development and they have the Nate Davis signing. Maybe like a Peter Skoronski, even though his grandpa, Packers legend. It kind of sucked to see him go to Chicago, but I think that pick makes a lot of sense. And if that's the case, if they can, shore up that side of the line a little bit, then I think he definitely has to prove himself more this season. Like, I'm not saying he has the perfect weapons. I will say I love DJ Moore. Was very, very upset when when he got traded to Chicago.
Yeah.
I was pounding the table for him to become a Packer, but obviously that's never going to happen. It's not the Green Bay way.
No
So
receivers allowed.
yeah, I think it's definitely going to be more than last year for sure. Obviously, and if he doesn't show much improvement, then I think this is kind of maybe it is Justin Fields kind of problem. But even though again he's a rival, I'm high on Justin Fields. So if he can't perform with the additions this offseason, then I don't know what he's performing with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree with him. I think that, as you said, no pun intended, if there's not more production out of Justin Fields this year, I think that we're going to be a little disheartened by that, just because I think a lot of people want to see Justin Fields succeed. We see how he could just run all over a team and pull those type of Lamar Jackson MVP type runs where he's just like 85 yards, he's gone. And when you see a player that that can do that and is that of that caliber, you want to see that guy succeed and like have an incredible season like Lamar, and you kind of see that type of ability in him. And I think that like Lamar, he might never get the type of weapons that, a Josh Allen or, a Patrick Mahomes, these guys got those number one receivers. I don't know if DJ Moore is exactly like a Stephon Diggs or a Tyreek Hill, but I think that it's definitely a step up of what he had before. All he really had was, Chase Claypool, who was acquired, halfway through the season. And I think that DJ Moore will definitely help him progress his game. And I think that they need that tight end duo in the O-line to really progress as well, because if he doesn't have enough time, he's going to start to run for his life again. And then that's when the offense really doesn't perform at the level that it can. So while Justin Fields, I don't know if it's a make it or break it type season at all, but if there's no immediate, production value that you see right away, then it's going to be a little disheartening for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I'm probably a little bit lower on him than the national zeitgeist. Certainly the Good Morning Football opinion.
They love him.
I saw a lot of second best quarterback in the NFC. I mean that's reprehensible, frankly, as a show that's football specific.
Yeah.
Just because he was abysmal as a passer. I mean, he was unequivocally bad.
He was worse than Zach Wilson in passing last year, and
Yes.
nobody brings that up when they like.
No,
I think he can be a good passer.
Yes,
I do think that. Like, he wasn't even a runner really at Ohio State, but he was worse than Zach Wilson, who was benched. And they're trying to get a 40-year-old to replace him. Yes. So
yeah, I think a superior leader to Zach Wilson for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I too do hope the best for him. I love those dual threat kind of quarterbacks. But he's a singular threat right now.
Yep.
He's
exactly
something I mentioned that is his biggest issue is kind of getting happy feet back there and bailing from clean pockets and relying on his ability to run the football, which again is a great trait to have. Allows him to do a lot of things out of structure. But not, and it's obviously a lofty comparison, but not the way like a Mahomes or a Josh Allen scrambles and keeps his eyes downfield and makes a play. It's just bailing from that pocket and counting on his legs. So he's going to have to take some steps forward there for sure. Just as far as being a pocket passer when he needs to be. And I think having that ensemble of receivers is going to help that, because there were also a lot of times where the pocket was clean, but nobody was open either. So I can't hold all of that against him. But if there isn't any improvement in that regard with the improvement of the weapons around him and so on, I think it's they should stick at one and trade Fields and draft Bryce Young is overblown as all that shit was. I think that might be a more serious conversation this next off season. If we have a duplicate year from him as far as being a passer goes, and their records similar, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as looking towards the draft here, Michael, you mentioned Skoronski potentially, and I think that should be offensive line. I mean, should be a priority because there aren't a great 5 starters on that line right now. Jenkins showed some improvement, but he's still up in the air. They're really only 2 sure things right now, I think, are Braxton Jones and Nate Davis, as far as the future of that offensive line goes. So I definitely think that's something that's important to shore up. But we haven't talked at all about this defense yet, and this might be the worst defensive line in football still after the free agent frenzy. It might not be the worst front 7 in football anymore after the signings, but it's still not a good situation up front, and there's just going to be a lot more pressure than on a pretty middling secondary as is. I like Jalen Johnson, Eddie Jackson starting to age out. I love Jaquan Brisker out of Penn State, but yes, Kyler Gordon, Kindle Vilder. No, I'm kidding. And but the defensive line needs work. So I think depending on how the board falls, if there's a Tyree Wilson there at 9, and he might go very, very much earlier. If Jalen Carter falls to 9, I think you've got to pull that trigger and fill the rest of the holes on the roster later on, just because that's such a huge area of need that they really didn't touch in free agency either, outside of DeMarcus Walker. Unless there's someone else I'm missing. I don't think they Andrew Billings. Yeah, that's about it. That's all they did to address the defensive line through free agency. So that's my take at 9. I think that has to be the hope. And if they've identified somebody they like at the edge or on the interior defensive line that's there at 9, I think that's got to be the play. Or maybe they even trade down and try to get some more capital that way. But that would be the way I would go initially. That's the most glaring need as far as I'm concerned. Nick, what are your thoughts on pick 9 for the Bears if you're looking at this roster and big time needs?
Yeah, I mean, just to go against what you said, because I don't want to say the same thing. I think that they could also shore up, maybe even another, offensive lineman, or maybe another receiver. Maybe if they see JSN there at 9, they could potentially grab him and make, him and DJ Moore a pretty damn good duo. Obviously D-line is what they need the most. And O-line, they still can shore up some things there, but I like their tight end duo. Their running back duo is good as well, but if they could snag JSN there, I think he brings a lot of, grit. I think he brings a lot of speed, heart to the team that Chicago, that's what ensembles them, that's what they are. So, if they could grab somebody that's also, he's got a lot of, I don't know how to explain it, but he's a flashy type guy. People are going to be like, oh shit, JSN, he's to Chicago. Now we're going to want to watch their games with Justin Fields. It brings some kind of spark that people are going to want to watch. So they become a fun team, what a fundamental need is obviously defensive line. But if they want to get a little flashy, a little fun, you could grab a receiver at 9 there and try to go that route.
Yeah, and I think with as many needs and as far away as they probably are from a championship window where you're really just drafting for need, I think this could be a sneaky landing spot for Bijan Robinson as well.
Yeah, maybe.
Really lean into what's already sort of a strength. They obviously weren't interested in giving out a second contract to Montgomery. Khalil Herbert is a year or 2 away from that. Deontay Foreman's a committee back at this point in his career. He's just on a 1-year, $3 million deal, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that could be a possibility as well, at least potentially. He might not go that high in general, but I think it would be a sneaky good landing spot for him. Before we move on to the Lions, Michael, do you have any other thoughts on the Bears here?
I do want to bring up that if to add to Nick's thing about JSN, if the Bears do take JSN, I think they have to. They're kind of admitting and maybe thinking about trading Darnell Mooney if that happens.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't know what's going on with his injury. I know he was out for like the rest of the season towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when like his timetable is, or if it's even to that extent, really. I don't know if he'll be back by training camp or not. But if they do take a receiver, I think that's just kind of they're going to start shopping Darnell Mooney. But I will add, if Bijan Robinson ends up being a Chicago Bear, he will help the fight to get Joe Barry fired. So, because that man does not know how to stop good running backs or mobile quarterbacks even. So,
No, I feel bad you guys kept yours and we got rid of Donatel. But yeah, in JSN, the Ohio State connection, I mean, that's something that's we've seen work out for Burrow and Chase, and that could be something to really appease Justin Fields too, and make it as easy on him as he can. Bring some more familiarity back into his his weapons.
And hey, listen, you can't. Hey, listen, you can't draft a defensive line bust if you don't draft one at all, right? All right,
that's true.
Okay.
Let's talk the knee biters here. And these guys are the darlings of national media right now. So we're gonna talk about it. I'm gonna see where you guys are at with them, feel you guys out a little bit, and then I'll give my 2 cents here on the Lions. And I've got their draft capital rolling on the bottom here. I talked about some of their secondary signings. We're obviously big on those as a group here. And as far as the rest of their moves went, nothing crazy outside of that. The only other one I wanted to be sure to mention before I tossed it to you guys was this is where David Montgomery landed. So, and they lose Jamal Williams and replace him with David Montgomery. Jamal Williams just felt like such a perfect fit for this locker room and this culture. I was surprised they let him walk and signed another free agent running back.
Yeah.
That seemed a little weird to me, especially when I think he only got $4 million a year in New Orleans. I think it was 3 years, 12. And it's 3 years, 18 for David Montgomery, obviously a little bit younger. But I thought that was a little weird. Before we jump into real specifics with draft capital, Nick, what are your feelings on Detroit right now?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Jamal Williams, he also had that awesome interview at the end of the last game against Green Bay where he said, "Listen, guys, we won this game, but we're not going to the playoffs, but we're going to be here next year." And it was like Jamal Williams and Detroit is just like two peas in a pot, man. They're going to be together forever. And then all of a sudden it's like Jamal Williams is pissed off as Detroit and he signed with New Orleans. I'm like, what? what? And so, like he also got lowballed. He got lowballed. They totally just didn't respect him as what he wanted, and then he didn't even get that much in New Orleans. And then they go out and get David Montgomery. It was very weird. It was very much of a whirlwind situation. I don't know if Dan Campbell was excited about that because I'm sure he loved Jamal. So, interesting situation there that unfolded. I still think Jared Goff is not the franchise, obviously, but I think that he is a guy that could lead them to the playoffs, and I think that he will this season. I like the David, all things put aside, I do like the Montgomery signing. He's younger, as you said, and he's a good player, but I just thought that Jamal really fit in that system. That chemistry was really building with them. So, and as you said, a really good locker room guys. So, we're going to see how St. Brown continues to develop here this year. I think that everything's looking up for Detroit finally for the first time ever, maybe. I think that this is finally a really good roster that has an opportunity to make some noise. 10, 11 wins, playoff berth. If not, that's going to be really disappointing.
Yeah, for sure, and particularly as a fit next to DeAndre Swift. I thought Jamal Williams was a perfect complement, and Montgomery is a little bit less so. Just more of a do-it-all back, and it wasn't that kind of speed power duo kind of thing. But
Yeah.
Michael, what are your kind of blanket thoughts on Detroit here?
I will add, I think Jamal Williams is a locker room fit in every locker room.
Maybe.
That dude
That's true.
is one of the most likable humans on earth. He's super charismatic, so funny, genuinely very nice. I don't know if you've ever seen any clips of him like interacting with like fans at games or anything. He's very personable, so I think he would fit in quite literally anywhere. I want to know what the Lions offer was. If they're gonna give David Montgomery, who I am historically super low on, if they're gonna give David Montgomery $6 million a year, and then Jamal Williams claims that the offer he got was disrespectful and takes less than David Montgomery did in New Orleans. I just want to know what their offer was, because didn't he break like their franchise touchdown record
17
last year? Yeah. How do you not give that guy a reasonable contract? And all of your fans love him. Like your divisional rivals, the Packers, like their fans still love him. Like clearly he's a likable guy. And that whole situation really just bothered me in like multiple ways.
Yeah.
And outside of that, defending Jamal Williams, I will say the Lions are really piecing it together, which I'm not a huge fan of, although I've had a lot of respect for Detroit for being as bad as they've been, but still having the great moments that they do, especially under Dan Campbell. I will say I think Jared Goff is better than people will say. I used to be a huge Jared Goff hater. Don't know why. No reason really. Just when he was on the Rams, I was like, I don't like Jared Goff.
Yep.
Because he looked like a system quarterback. That's why.
Yeah. But now he's in Detroit and still playing in a system that's a lot of like old school football still. It's a really good mesh of new school with their offensive coordinator and Dan Campbell, who I think just wishes that he could be on the field to run people over. So I think he's the perfect quarterback for their system. But yeah, with his age and a lot of money that they owe him, I don't know if he's necessarily their forever franchise guy. I think they'll probably get somebody in the next few years. I'm not going to say this year, but next few years.
Yeah, and that's something that's very underrated about this Lions offseason as well, was retaining Ben Johnson at offensive coordinator. You saw him really maximize Jared Goff last season, I think, and it is an offense that really schemes guys open. The things they do with Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's a drag machine, getting across the middle of the field and exposing slower linebackers, and keeping Ben Johnson around and having that connection with Goff, I think, is going to be huge, and you might even see him take a step further forward this season. Dan Campbell just came out with a statement that he feels Goff is the franchise quarterback. You don't let go of guys like that when you have them in the building. So I mean, what else are you going to say when the guy's under contract?
He's literally your quarterback. But
yeah, exactly.
So that doesn't give us any insight into the long-term plans necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that he is somebody that they really feel confident in right now, especially with the way the rest of the roster is playing out. And frankly, if it doesn't work out, past this season, there's only $5 million dead cap tied to Jared Goff. If at the end of the season they want to move on from him, I mean, there's not much of a Band-Aid to rip off, really. It'd be a pretty smooth transition for them financially. But if he does work out, it could be another extension for him potentially, especially if you see them go deep into the playoffs, and they're able to put they have pick 6 and 18 in the first round this season, so they could put some real high caliber players around him on the offensive side, to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, maybe add a third receiver into that mix, and really make it easy on Goff. Which, and I don't think that's a crutch for them. I think he fits into exactly what Ben Johnson wants to do. He doesn't feel like a guy who's holding them back, really. Everybody wants that mobile quarterback that can make it happen when it all breaks down. But to this point, Johnson's scheme hasn't broken down much. It was really starting to rev up towards the end of the season as well. So with these 2 first-round picks for a team that went 9-8 and was on an upward trajectory, having 2 first-round picks, I think is really what's left so many people brazen in their takes on the Detroit Lions outlook for 2023. So with 6 and 18, I think the biggest need or the biggest issue with this team last season was the run defense.
Yes.
We saw him give up 300 yards on the ground to Carolina, Deontay Foreman. But so he's in the division now. But so they did go out and grab Isaiah Buggs in free agency, who's a solid guy on the interior. A little disappointing, I think, from Aleem McNeil and Levi Onwuzurike, a couple guys who they've drafted over the past couple of years on that interior D-line, to really get gashed like that. Anzalone's back, and we'll see if they try to address those run defense issues at the second level a little bit more in the draft. But at 6, they could be in a really good spot to get another primetime edge player to go up with Aiden Hutchinson. I don't see a huge immediate need on the offense at 6 that would make a ton of sense. I mean, this is one of the best offensive lines in football. Taylor Decker, Penei Sewell is that tackle duo. You don't have to go tackle high. No guard's going to warrant that high of a pick, and even then, Jonah Jackson is solid. Frank Ragnow is one of the best centers in the league. Like, I think you feel pretty comfortable there going defense, maybe even with both of these top 2 picks. You could go. I mean, they could conceivably end up with like a Tyree Wilson and like Devin Witherspoon or a Brian Branch or something like that. And feel really good coming out of the first round, or trade back with one of those and grab a couple more day 2 guys. So 5 top 100 picks and a few more day 3 guys. And if they hit this draft and it's a solid one, especially with those top 2 picks, this could be an even scarier team for us in the NFC here. As far as looking at this draft goes, do you guys have any other thoughts on either if it's player specific or what positions you feel they should target at 6, I suppose, specifically? Michael, I'll start with you.
So I kind of want to like cheat a little bit in my answer here. I was honestly to prepare for the show, I was looking at maybe making a mock draft for the Lions. Just starting out the division, Detroit happened to be first. I think, and this is crazy, and I could be, pulling like a draft day situation here. Maybe they trade up with the Cardinals to 3, I believe,
3,
and they get like a Will Anderson. And if they can somehow keep 18 in that situation, and as much as I want him to be a Packer, Darnell Washington to Detroit, Will Anderson and Darnell Washington to Detroit. I don't care who they draft for the rest of the draft.
Mercedes Lewis reincarnate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want that man to be a Packer so bad, but it makes so much sense that if he ends up being a Lion. So if they can somehow trade up, get a Will Anderson, although I don't think Arizona's gonna trade out a 3.
No.
Yeah, that's what I think they should do.
Yeah, this is a great tight end draft. I didn't even think about that
Yes.
for Detroit yet, and they just gave us TJ last year. So
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they have
so
Brock
yeah, that's
Wright.
very interesting. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Nick, any thoughts on who they should or what they should target at 6 and 18 here?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind with Detroit Lions at this point is, welcome the competition. Anytime that you can draft somebody that, a guy like Penei Sewell or a guy like, any of these guys, in the secondary potentially or even on offense that can create, some competition in training camp and throughout the season, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to have multiple guys that can, perform well for you all season. And if one goes down, you got a guy. Um, I think that obviously the biggest need, as you said, is like that edge and like linebacker, tandem. Obviously, they really, really, really did a great job with the secondary. And they've had Panay, and now and with Aiden Hutchinson, they have a really solid defense. And it's really just like that middle ground that they need to strengthen. Their offense has really come along, as you said, Mike, with like Jared Goff. While he's not the guy's going to be there in 5-10 years, he can certainly be the guy that takes you to the promised land in 1 to 3, as he did with LA. And that team, they had some holes as well, just with a really, really, really solid coach in Sean McVay, and he was probably at the top of his game at that time. So I think that if you're not looking at defense, you could always get some nice, continue to get some nice competition on the offensive side of the ball. And while Will Anderson would be so nice to have, I just don't think Arizona. I've seen so many Arizona blogs say like we're so excited to get Will Anderson. So I was like, I don't think he's going to Detroit, even though that'd be pretty exciting. I really hope they don't go quarterback, because that would just really screw things up in my opinion. I think they have a good system in place right now. So yeah, I think Detroit's got a good future here.
Yeah, I think it's at least one more full off season of all right, how good can we get this team around Jared Goff?
Yeah.
I think at least one more run for him, right? Michael, to this point, it's a pretty uneventful off season for your Packers.
Yeah.
Depending on what you consider an event, I guess.
What part of the offseason do you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So the Rodgers saga is one thing. We don't have to dive down that rabbit hole until we have something a little bit more concrete. Reports coming out that it's 2 second rounders. So we'll see what happens there. But I do want to gear this a little bit more towards the vision around Jordan Love. And I know you're on that train. And I know you've got pretty high hopes for him as well. So and it's they're kind of held hostage a little bit right now with how they were able to attack free agency. Things a little bit up in the air. The Jets move kind of a foregone conclusion, but at the same time, you can't make many deals before any of that money's off the books, and we don't even know how much of that it's going to be at this point. It's a really weird situation. So I'd like to talk with you a little bit more about the Jimmies and Joes than the X's and O's with Green Bay right here. I know how you feel about Joe Barry. I know how you feel about Brian Gutekunst. But if with your Packers knowledge, what do you feel the biggest need is at 15? And then how do you think this team looks with Jordan Love under center going into 2023 if things stay relatively the same, if there aren't any big shakeups following the Rodgers move?
I will say, to just add a little bit of thing about Brian Gutekunst, I've come around on Gutekunst.
Okay.
Yeah. Most recently with the interview at the owners meeting, where
Saw
he
that.
basically said straight up that Aaron Rodgers is lying, that he tried to contact him, and he's like, "We moved on. If you didn't text me back, like that's on you."
Yeah, I got to do my job.
Yeah, so that I was like, "Ooh, there's a little bit of spice in Brian. I didn't expect that." So
Yeah.
I've come around on Gutekunst a little bit.
Nice.
But as for our biggest need, I want to put Jordan Love in a position to succeed, but as you know, the Packer way, we're not taking a receiver at 15. If we do, I'll be shocked, and it'd be hilarious that right after the Rodgers saga ends, we take a weapon in round one.
Man, that'd be funny.
I would lose my mind. As for need, I don't know if it's going to happen that we take somebody offensive player even at 15. If we do, I think it's a tight end, and I think my heart says Darnell Washington because he's a Mercedes Lewis replacement. He's really an offensive line that can catch, an offensive lineman that can catch. He's crazy. I know there's a lot of Packers fans that
so nuts.
Yeah. There's a lot of Packer fans that disagree with me. I bring up Darnell Washington and they just flat out say no, and they're not high on him. I've had people tell me he's a 4th rounder at best, which is insane. So I would like a tight end, somebody versatile like Darnell Washington. He's not a Kyle Pitts where he's practically a receiver, but he's huge and he can catch. And for how big he is, he can move. So that's who I'd take at 15. I think it's going to be somebody like a Brian Branch. Although his hips bother me. he's not very fluid in the hips. Yeah. I think he's going to be more of like a Jaquan Brisker type.
Sure.
Where he's going to be pretty okay in
Straight
coverage.
line athlete.
Yes, exactly. I wouldn't be shocked if he's for some reason coming off the edge every once in a while. Well, no, I would be really shocked because it's Joe Barry. But at safety, maybe edge if there's somebody there. But I think it's got to be safety or like tight end / maybe receiver. I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, safety, tight end. Even edge, but who knows with Rashawn Gary when he's going to be back? It might be like November when he comes back. So as for the future with Jordan Love under center, Matt LaFleur came out, I believe today or yesterday, and said that people need to temper their expectations a little bit, which a lot of Packers fans took way too literally. They took it as like a nightmare, like foreshadowing, like that he was saying that Jordan Love sucks and everything like that.
I know something you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you do need to temper your expectations in the sense that it's his first year starting. We're losing a Hall of Fame quarterback. You can't expect back-to-back MVP level play from a guy who hasn't started. Well, I guess he did start against Kansas City, but he was really bad and a totally different quarterback then. So
Andy Reid doesn't really remember it.
Yeah, exactly. Even though he outplayed Mahomes in that game, but that's, whatever. So I do think that the expectations are like ceiling wise, I'm going to say like wild card. And if we're anything below 6 wins, I'm going to be very disappointed. Just because we do have the talent. And I do believe, and this will get me annihilated by other Packers fans, I think Matt LaFleur is a good coach. So I think if he can have somebody who's going to come in, run what he is taught, and not come up with hand signals from 2009 to tell a receiver how to run a go route, I think there's actually going to be a little more structure to our offense. I don't think there's going to be as much chucking it deep on 3rd and one and hope that a PI is called.
Yeah, that was brutal.
Yeah, so I do think that LaFleur is a good head coach. I think that Jordan Love will actually run the system. I really think that Christian Watson's really gonna have real good chemistry with Jordan Love, and they're already working out together. So, yeah, my expectations realistically are 9 wins, but that could be a bit much. But I think the ceiling, wild card, floor, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can only be so bad a head coach to go win 13 games in your first 3 seasons. 3, right? First 3 years?
Yeah, but it's all Rodgers.
It's all Rodgers. Yeah, yeah.
It's all Rodgers.
Yeah. And I would love – I mean, okay, I wouldn't love it. But I think it would be great football to see Darnell Washington go to the Pack. Think about the LaFleur wide zone out of 11 personnel with Bach or Jenkins, Bach, and Darnell Washington kicking one side of the field out with Aaron Jones running the ball.
Be insane.
That could be really dangerous.
Yeah.
So and it's particularly on the defensive side, the talent's there. So if the talent is deployed properly, if we see a better season out of Joe Barry, if he's a little bit less predictable maybe on that side of the ball, and you see LaFleur run the offense, sort of simplify the offense, I suppose, kind of like you mentioned, and lean on that running back duo and lean on a very solid offensive line and make the right picks. Yeah, I mean, I think this could be a wild card team. It probably should have been last year. And the yin and yang of having Aaron Rodgers, but also having Aaron Rodgers. But I don't know the entire effect that had on that outcome, but we could see that improve. Could see a big step from there. I have no idea what's going to go on with the Packers, and there's still a lot of offseason to be had too. So it's a very, very interesting situation. All right, let's talk reigning NFC North champs.
And just slide it in there real subtly.
The Minnesota Vikings. So we talked about the Byron Murphy signing. And just overall, that's been microcosmic of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's approach to this offseason. He's going young, but he's also kind of going bargain bin with the fact that it's a lot of Marcus Davenport is of the same ilk, where he's 26, coming. He's got some injury concerns. For that reason, they got him on what was reported as a 1-year, $13 million deal. But it's in the hopes of extending him long-term, in the hopes that he works out this season. There's 4 void years attached to that contract. So I told you Byron Murphy's 2023 cap hits 2.81 when his contract's reported at 11 mil APY. Davenport's 2023 cap hits only 5.96 mil. And the rest is prorated out through 2027, actually right now. And I think he's going to be a really interesting piece for Brian Flores to use. One of the biggest things the Vikings did over this offseason was replace Ed Donatel with Brian Flores at defensive coordinator. I think that is going to make an even bigger impact than a lot of people, especially outside of Viking circles, think. I mean, if you watched the Vikings defense operate last season, and I watched it, I watched every snap multiple times. I watched the all-22. I was trying to figure something out, and it was just so cookie cutter, so predictable. And then you watch any Brian Flores defense play, you know that at the very least, it's going to be a very different story on the defensive side. Whether that turns into superior results or not, it's not going to be that same shit, and it's going to be an aggressive defense. It's as opposed to a very passive defense that we saw last season. So for what that's worth, I think it's at least what every Vikings fan wants to see. So obviously, hopefully that plays out in our favor. But I think it's got to improve at a baseline, and it's tough to envision the offense taking much of a step back. We could see a regression to the mean as with the one-score games, the fourth quarter comebacks, all of that. So I don't necessarily think I'd predict another 13 wins, but I do think this is a team that's still in position to win the division. I think it's still theirs to lose, unless we really just see Detroit explode and win 13, 14 games, and it's a wild card team. But yeah, that's and I think they've addressed some needs through the offseason. I think it's been navigated pretty well, and I mean, re-signed Garrett Bradbury. His cap hit's only 2 something. And Josh Oliver was a big signing coming over from Baltimore, a really strong blocking tight end, and Dean Lowry coming over from the Packers.
Traitor.
Between those 4 signings, to the 2023 cap, between those 4 guys, Josh Oliver, Dean Lowry, Marcus Davenport, and Byron Murphy, it's only $13.39 million to the 2023 cap, which is pretty wild. And it shows you that they really want to attack 2023 and win now. There were a lot of people who thought they might move a little bit more towards a rebuild, but I think it's been pretty evident that they are attacking the 2023 window. They didn't extend Kirk Cousins, just did a full restructure. So he's only on contract for 2023, $28.5 million dead cap in 2024 if they move on from him. So, I'll push my agenda for the draft in a second here, but I'll pass it off to you, Nick. And if you want to just give your thoughts on what the Vikings might be looking for in the 2023 draft here, and what their outlook looks like.
Yeah, I mean, you make a lot of. I mean, you're a Vikings guy, so you make a lot of good points. Yeah, I think that, as you said, there's no way that they're going to have this many, close games again, and then always end up on top. It's just insane. I think that season as a Viking fan, you're going to look back on and be like, holy shit, like, what was that year? Like, we had so many games where it was just like, we should have lost, we won, we should have won, we kind of lost that one. Like, it went into overtime.
That was
Bills
a moral
fumbled on the goal line. Like, it was so insane that it was like, this didn't feel real. They're down by 33 of the Colts, but they won. It was like, what? It's like, yeah. So it was just an insane clusterfuck year for the Vikings that ended, unfortunately, obviously. I think that, the restructure and not, extension of Kirk Cousins, that does show that they're not going to move forward with him ultimately. But, he's still got a chance, and they still have a really good offense around him. They got the best receiver in football, in my opinion. And then the defense just needs a lot of work, like, obviously they did Brian Flores, and they really have helped him a lot. Brian Flores is going to be so cool. Sorry, Kev. The defense has really gotten better over the free agency period, and Brian Flores is a great coach. So he's head coach material. He was really good for Miami, and he's going to be a great defensive coordinator. He knows what he wants to do with his defense, and he kind of just expects something out of it that I think other guys don't. So I've really enjoyed the pickups of like Byron Murphy. He was a great player in Arizona. I think that's an awesome pickup. Retaining guy. Obviously, they lose Eric Hendricks, which is tough because he's been a homegrown type linebacker. So I think that in the draft they try to address that linebacker need again. They try to get a linebacker that can really man that middle of the field, so that Daniel Jones doesn't just cut you across the middle, to random wide receivers all game. You know what I mean? So, I mean, you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
So, so I think that in that regard, they're going for linebackers, somebody like Tremaine Edmonds, that can run sideline to sideline, keep up with a guy like Darius Slayton or whoever the New York Giants seem to have on that day. So I think that's really what they should be looking for. They've solidified the secondary, in my opinion. And, the D-line still has some solid players on it. I don't think they should go offense. TJ Hawkinson's one of the premier tight ends. They got the most premier wide receiver in the league. So, and of course, still Dalvin Cook, who's just an absolute stud. So, when it comes down to it, O-line, middle line, he's looking at me. O-line, middle linebacker, that type of position, I think that's what they should be addressing in the draft.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I'm actually going to I'm just gonna push a quick agenda here.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Mike's like, I've never seen it before.
Yeah. So Jack Campbell was exactly who I was going to bring up. I originally had him going to Chicago before they got Tremaine Edmonds.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Yep. Really excited for that possibility.
Yes, I mean, about that same height, just a guy who over the middle could take a lot of things away. Somebody of that ilk is, I think, something that would really benefit the defense. But also, I think the scheme change will avoid a lot of that conflict over the middle for the linebackers. Flores likes to blitz the backers a lot. He likes to play a lot more man. So, I think about half of those situations just probably won't even take place in this defense this year. And that was the thing about Donatel is he hung those linebackers out to dry. I mean, I'm happy for Kendricks. He's going back to LA, but I think his Minnesota career was sort of brought to a close by a lot of it was that scheme, just because it showed his loss of a step a lot faster than he should have, if that makes sense. But that's kind of my take on it. So let's jump to division winners here, and see where that takes us. I will start with you, Nick, the outsider, and see who your pick for the 2023 division winner is.
All right. Obviously, I've been really high on Detroit. Low. I mean, I'm not low on Chicago, but I don't think they're ready. And Green Bay is more of a 6 to 9 win team, I think, this year. Unfortunately, sorry, Mike. I think that it's between Minnesota and Detroit, and at the end of the day, ultimately, I think that Detroit does take it, just because they're a force. They're a force. I mean, they don't really have a position anymore where it's like, oh man, they're kind of weak there, And even if they are, they still, I mean, maybe, like as I said, like that middle of the pack linebacker crew, but they still got Aiden Hutchinson who can, Penei Sewell. They have such the defensive reckoning there that they have such good playmakers. And I don't know. I just feel like at the end of the day, ultimately, Dan Campbell's going to lead those guys to their first playoff berth in a long time. And it's going to be a cool thing.
Yeah. If I think Michael probably identifies with this too as a Packers fan. Like, we're always kind of fuck the Bears, fuck the Packers. But if the Lions win the division, I mean, because they got it. The last time the Lions won the division was called the NFC Central.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The Buccaneers have won this division more recently than the Lions have.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, go Lions, man. They're kind of. I always root for them against the Bears. I always root for them against the Packers. I'm always less disheartened by a Lions loss than the other teams. Maybe it's a little more disheartening, but I'm less pissed about it. That's just kind of how the NFC North is, man. All our boss is all in on the Lions. Uh-oh. I'll have to knock him off the ledge. Michael, you're next. Who you got?
Well, I think you're gonna get outnumbered here. I'm also going with Detroit. Sorry, I think it's gonna be Detroit and Minnesota are gonna be fighting neck and neck for that division. That's really how I see it. And yes, it as a Packers fan, it's kind of like when Detroit wins, you're like, hell yeah, good for Detroit. But it obviously you never want to see them win against your own team. It's kind of a long, complicated story, but my partner's like a pseudo Lions fan. They just followed them on TikTok at one point and like talked in like their live chat for a while. So they're like, I'm a Lions fan now. They told them that they could play offensive line if they wanted. So like, yeah. I think it's going to be Detroit. I think Dan Campbell's building something real special there. They finally are, I'm not going to say them like they're real Super Bowl contenders, but I think they can definitely win the division. Who knows what's going to happen in Green Bay? Chicago, I don't think is ready. Minnesota, I wouldn't be shocked if they win either.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah, they just have a couple of losses, but I think they've kind of recuperated from that a little bit. And then, they still have Justin Jefferson. They have a great tight end in TJ Hawkinson. I wouldn't put Dalvin Cook in stud category anymore. I still think he's pretty good, but I think once he put on number 4, he was just kind of like, So I think it's Detroit.
Top 10.
Yeah, and that's who I feel like the competition is right now too. Immediately, just because not only are they on an upward trajectory, they've been building momentum over the last couple of years, and the draft capital they have. If they hit on these picks in the top 20, they could be really, really dangerous. So no, I'm not mad at you guys at all for that, but I want to go with the Vikes to win the division.
I hope so.
And I think a big part of that too is Brian Flores coming over. So he was the defensive coordinator for the Patriots. He was the defensive play caller for the Patriots in 2018 when they beat Jared Goff's Rams in the Super Bowl. Held him to 3 points. And Bill Belichick said to B-Flow before the game, he said, if we show him something he hasn't seen before, he's going to shit in his pants. And he did.
He for sure did.
He for sure did. Good.
And he might twice this season. But no, I really do think that on the chessboard, the matchup against Ben Johnson's Lions is going to be a much more favorable one for the Vikings this season. We've got a guy like Byron Murphy who now can follow Amon-Ra St. Brown into the slot instead of Shannon Sullivan. He had the one good year for you guys in 2021 or 2020. But he had the one good year, came over here. I know the 20s. I wrote down 2022 on a piece of work paper for the date, so I have no idea what's going on.
The past 3 years have been just one collective year.
Literally,
that usually happens on like January 5th. I'm like, oh, it's still okay. You know what I mean?
Like it was like March 18th, and I was like, But no, I really think that, and like I mentioned, it's tough to envision the offense taking a step back as well. This is the first time over his Vikings tenure that Kirk Cousins has the same offensive play caller for back-to-back seasons. Which and he mentioned too, he was to his own admission that he wasn't necessarily all the way comfortable in the system until about halfway through last season. So I think the same way keeping Ben Johnson there for Jared Goff is going to make the growth for him and the improvement for him within the system pretty organic. I think we'll see the same for Kevin O'Connell with Kirk Cousins another year. And it's an interesting situation with him as well. Apparently the Vikings, so apparently he wasn't even seeking 40 mil APY. Apparently it was less than that, less than the Daniel Jones number. And the Vikings didn't jump on that. Now, the full restructure, I don't think precludes them from extending him down the road. I just think that they remained steadfast and didn't sort of tether themselves to another year of Kirk Cousins right away. I think it really hinges on how 2023 goes, and I love that. My agenda, though, for the Vikings is is the mayonnaise, man. And I really think that there's a chance they go for Will Levis. I think it really could happen because Kirk Cousins, Kevin O'Connell actually has some ties to the Kentucky staff. They were at his pro day. They are very, very interested in Will Levis, I think. And it's something where that Kirk restructure also kind of sets them up. Hey, if we're going to eat 28.5 in dead cap for 2024, how different does that leave our cap situation if the quarterback playing is on a rookie contract? Because it's a matter of
I replied to this. I forgot about it.
Yeah, don't forget about this. Sear this into your brains.
No,
not
doing that.
Was actually on this thread.
No.
He didn't know about it yet. He didn't know this was happening.
Yeah, I didn't know about this. I was like, this is an agenda that I was not aware of. I didn't know Minnesota wanted Will Levis.
We're in, man. I think I'm starting to get the wheels turning a little bit. The propaganda machine is starting to get moving, but I think it actually could be like a huge transitionary season for them. And if they get a guy like that to sit a year behind one of the best pocket passers in football, and Kirk Cousins, who to this point has shown to have adamantium bones. He never gets hurt, and he takes these rib shots that make me wince on the broadcast, not even on the replay. And he still makes the throws. So I got a ton of respect for Kirk Cousins. But if he finally goes down, it's not Nick Mullins coming in. Maybe it's a guy who can scoot a little bit, and it's somebody like Will Levis. But whether that's the case or not, there'd be a lot of draft capital to go get him. But if they do stick and pick at 23 or they trade down, another receiver getting in the mix with Justin Jefferson would be awesome. And it does seem to, reading the tea leaves, seems like they're going to go to more 12, 13 personnel, 22 personnel. They brought CJ Ham back, the fullback, brought Josh Oliver over from Baltimore, who was the second highest graded run blocking tight end per PFF last season. And they might start to zig while the rest of the league is still zagging. We saw the Chiefs succeed a lot out of 13 personnel while still having a top 3 pass rate. So they used that Noah Gray and all those other tight ends outside of Kelsey to make some stuff happen there. And Josh Oliver, too, coming out of San Jose State, was a pass catcher. And he was relegated to this blocking role alongside Mark Andrews with the departure of Nick Boyle from Baltimore. So, it could just be a very, very interesting offense that maybe a little bit different, but it's tough to envision a step back when you see Kirk Cousins with a second year with him. Still got Justin Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson is his second year in the system. Dalvin Cook still on the roster. Alexander Madison re-signed. Could be a little bit more run heavy, but I'm very confident actually, and very positive about this season right now. But the Lions will contend. I do think the Packers will be a little bit better, honestly. I think it'll be kind of a cleansing moment for the locker room.
He's gone.
When he's gone, guys. It's our team now. But I think that could embolden some of the guys on that roster, and that could be really good for the organization. So I do expect them to be a little bit more competitive. The Bears are still a fuck show. They're not going to be good. The whole thing, like, people are just like, oh, they made this move, and it's like, guys, you realize how bad they were? Like, it's not.
You know how bad they were before this.
Remember the Texans free agency
so
last
bad.
season? How awesome was that? They're so bad, dude. They're so bad.
Teams would play like not their best game at all and beat them by like 25.
Yes. Yeah. They're literally so bad.
So
So I don't see them even being in the conversation. But yeah, I respect the Lions' takes. I do think the Packers will be in the mix. And with how weak the NFC is, just kind of overall, 9-8 might get you a wild card. It did last season.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a competitive division with those three teams. We'll all beat up on the Bears and see what happens down the stretch. But so we probably a product of this being mine and Michael's division. We did beat this one to death a little bit, but it was a fun time. Having some rants and rambles. So I think what we'll do is actually table the AFC North for next week, and maybe one of these weeks we double up on a division. And my math might even be off. We might still have. Let's see, what date is the draft? Is it the 27th? So we've actually got
about a
month here yet. So basically what I wanted to do with this series is sort of get a preview of each of these divisions out before the draft, just so we could mix some draft takes into it, talk some prospects as well. And then we'll kind of just recycle this once the draft is through, and then we can reflect on those draft picks at that point and have a little bit better idea of our division winner picks at that point. So we'll see if any of us change our minds or anything like that. We'll obviously have this stuff on record. But we will table the AFC North for next week, and we'll just figure it out one way or the other to make sure we get to the remaining 5 divisions before the draft and give our takes pre-draft, and then we'll circle back and give our post-draft takes. But any closing thoughts, gentlemen, on the Black and Blue division?
All I'll say is that you can laugh in our faces if your Minnesota Vikings win the division. I'll say that much.
All right, I might take you up on
that. My entire life, I really haven't had this many questions about the division, because Aaron Rodgers has been the quarterback since I was. He was drafted in 2005. I was 6, so. He's been the only quarterback I've known. Realistically, I don't remember the Favre era in Green Bay. I remember him as a Viking. I don't remember him in Green Bay.
Nice.
So yeah, I don't even know. I don't have words. I wouldn't be shocked if. Okay, I'd be shocked if Chicago won the division, but I wouldn't really be shocked if any of the other 3 teams somehow just pulled it off. It's Detroit, Minnesota, Green Bay, Chicago. Sorry, Chicago.
It's gonna be
yeah.
We'll have to talk to Nate about that too one of these days.
We got to get Nate.
We do
about
man.
the NFC North.
We do, man. I might have to curve my my lack of enthusiasm a little bit for him, gas him up a little bit. But yeah, I'm right there with you. And weirdly for me, it's sort of the opposite. Like, finally, this is the most stability I've had at quarterback as a Vikings fan since I can remember. I mean, there are baby pictures of me in a Brad Johnson Vikings jersey, Culpepper, Gus Frerotte, and then Ponder, Brooks Bollinger, just some awful, awful names that I could keep going with. Tavares Jackson, Joe Webb, just none of them.
Tavares Jackson. Wow.
Tavares Jackson, man,
He was on the
yes.
Seahawks too, I think.
He was.
Yeah.
He played a little ball there. But it was not good for a long time. And now it's good. It's not great, and it's not the be all end all. But there's no room for Kirk centrists on Vikings Twitter. If you don't know that, and I'm definitely one of those. But yeah, that's
He
Kev,
was.
Kev's got a good take here.
He was.
I fully agree.
I know, because he had strength and power and speed.
Yes,
Yeah.
he was a mad machine for sure.
I agree.
But yeah, those are my closing thoughts as well. I think it'll be a very interesting division, if nothing less. It's not going to be a 4-game spread from first to second place like we saw last season. I don't think. I wouldn't have any issue if it was the same outcome necessarily. But I think it'll be a lot more contentious at the top, and we'll see some improvement there. But thank you both for bearing with me as I spiraled a little bit into my Levis agenda and whatnot. And thanks for all the viewers, anybody who commented and stuck with us this long. We appreciate you, and we will be back next Tuesday, same time, 8 p.m. Central, to talk a little bit more ball. It should be AFC North and maybe AFC East we'll do, and we'll talk next division next week. But we'll figure that out, and it'll be same layout. So tell your friends that if we're talking about their favorite teams next week, and I'll let you know as soon as I have that planned out, which teams we'll be talking about. Well, thanks again, guys. We'll see you next week. Take it easy.
Have a great one, guys. Thank you.